So me and my friend were relocated with work for 6 months. We found a flat and off we went. Everyone that lived in the flats was really friendly and everyone said hello to each other. Lovely people. There was one guy who liked to travel. He told us he was off to Thailand. On his return, he had brought with him a guy that he met over there who was looking to rent a room somewhere. He was also polite, saying hello, would wave from his window. We stopped seeing the owner so much, and I know everyone else started asking the tenant if the owner was okay as well. He used to play his TV really loud, and no one had heard it for a while. The guy was charming and so on. We did this last night, we had dinner, etc. After a couple of days, we didn't see him either. Fast forward to a couple of weeks. I get home, police everywhere. I had to sign into my building with the police. As I walked up the stairs, the smell hit the back of my throat and I couldn't hold back the vomit. The tenant had used the owner's phone to text the owner's family saying he was fine and not to contact him as he was going away for a week or so. In reality, the tenant had killed the guy by hitting him round the back of the head at least 12 times with either a hammer or a bat, then left him there. To make it worse, his pregnant daughter found him. There would have been a lapse, so all the time that he was saying hello to us and the other neighbours and telling us that everything was fine, he was in fact living with a dead body wrapped up in a rug in the flat. We later found out he had murdered him and transferred a measly £7,000 from his account to his own, and then run away to Thailand. The scariest thing about this man was now knowing that he had murdered someone and had remained so calm, planning his getaway while staying in the flat with his victim and still being cheery with the neighbours. And I know now that the day he stood at his window waving at me and smiling, he was in the same room as the body was found, which makes me really sick knowing that poor guy was with him, and I just stood waving. I hope we never meet again. This isn't my own encounter, but my mother's experience from when she was around 19 to 21 years old. Background: she lived alone in a small unit in Richmond, Melbourne, and worked night shifts at a restaurant. Because she worked nights, she would sleep during the day and wake up around 2 to 3 p.m. She had a friend who visited her place regularly around the time she woke up, and they would eat a meal together or hang out for a couple hours. This was a part of my mum's daily routine. So here's the story. One night, my mum was at the laundromat alone, and she noticed a smallish young European or Middle Eastern macho-looking man unloading a washing machine full of baby clothes, like a huge amount of baby clothes. To my mum, the whole scene looked out of place. The guy didn't seem right. His demeanour didn't fit the load of baby clothing he was hauling into his basket. The man looked over at my mum, stared at her, but my mum mentioned that she didn't think much about it at the time. She left shortly after with her load and drove back to her unit. A couple weeks later, my mum finished her shift at work and drove back to her place, went to bed, woke up the next day in the afternoon, and soon heard a knock at her front door. Assuming it was her friend, she started walking down the hallway, where you could see a frosted window at the end. She saw a smallish figure, the exact size as her friend, and didn't have any thought that it could be someone other than who she expected. My mum said that when she was halfway down the hallway, her body suddenly stopped in its tracks, and an immediate, overwhelming feeling of crippling fear came over her. She was frozen and staring at the shape of the figure outside for a minute, when an unknown voice said something like, "Hey, come open this door for me. It's me." My mum slowly walked back, down the hallway, and into her bedroom. She waited in a room for the unknown visitor to leave, but he didn't. Every couple of minutes, he would say things like, "Come on, let me in. I know you're in there. Why don't you come open the door?" According to my mum, she waited in a room for maybe 2 hours, listening to the stranger calling out to her. She couldn't call anyone because the phone was in her kitchen, and she didn't have the bravery to leave her room, as the unit was tiny and easily accessible. She was afraid the person outside would hear her and find a way to get in. She mentioned that after waiting for so long, she couldn't handle the cold temperature of her room, as she was barely wearing anything. To note, she had only been sleeping beforehand. She finally got the guts to jump up and bolt from her room to the kitchen, which had a back door. She ran out the back door and down the street behind her unit. She had a neighbour who she was friends with and went straight to their place. She explained what happened, and they both looked out this person's window, which had a view of my mum's unit since their street was in a U-shape. They could see the stranger, still standing at the front of my mum's door. It was the same man from the laundromat a few weeks earlier. They called the police, but the man left before anyone came. After the incident, my mum stayed at her parents' house for a few days. Soon, she felt that she was safe to go live in her own unit again. A couple weeks after moving to a unit, she begins receiving notes/letters under her door and on her front steps. According to my mum, the letters had strange things written on them. She never told me what was written, but she mentioned that the sentences and words were extremely amateur, as if written by a 6-year-old. Letters were squiggly, written back to front, and arranged in strange sequences. My mum would give the notes into the police station. They weren't treated as much of a threat. This continued for maybe a few weeks or a month. One day, my mum woke up in the afternoon after a previous night shift. It was just another regular day, but she felt the need to go and spend the night at her parents' house. She left, spent the night, and got a call the next day to find that the strange man from the first incident had returned to her unit around the same time she left, made his way to the back of her unit with an axe, and immediately started axing down the back door like a madman. He was seen by a neighbour who called the police. However, the man left before the police came. Anyway, it turned out that the man's description, partnered with the strange notes my mum was receiving, fit the policeman's belief that the man was a suspect of the rape and murder of a number of girls in Melbourne from the 70s onwards. He wasn't caught, and I don't know if he ever was. He's most likely still out there. I found a site that might contain possible murders by the baby man. I also wonder if a few of the men around the ages of 56 and over with paedophilia and murder crimes on this site could possibly be the baby man. So this happened in 2013. This kid named Johnny moved in next door to me when he was around 12. And for lack of a better term, this kid was pretty much a pussy. I remember one time he fell on his skateboard and didn't land hard at all, and was crying his little heart out in my driveway when he was like 16. So fast forward to when this kid is like 18. By then I'm selling coke and molly pretty heavily, and he's one of my best customers. By now he's hanging with some pretty shady people, which my parents obviously aren't fans of. My parents also didn't ever know I was selling anything, because I was pretty good at keeping it under wraps. Johnny was clearly a follower. He went from the skater slash emo type to some wannabe thug, which he just wasn't built for. So, my parents go to the Outer Banks of North Carolina every year for 2 weeks and ask if I'll come stay at the house while they're gone. Which I was excited about, because their house is much better than my terrible little 1-bedroom apartment I had at the time. So everything was going fine at the house. I had my on and off again girlfriend over all the time, and there was quite a bit of drugs and alcohol going on. I was far from a saint back then. I'll never forget it. It was a Thursday night. My girl had left a few hours ago. I should say, earlier that day, Johnny had seen me out front of my parents and had asked for a front. I told him no, considering I never fronted anyone in all honesty, and had been using too much of my own stuff, so couldn't afford to. He didn't like that very much, and we got in an argument, and I pretty much punked him in front of all his little friends. So by now, it's like 2 in the morning, and I'm obviously nowhere near tired because of all the coke and molly. I'm sitting in the dark, watching Netflix in this den slash side living room my parents had in the downstairs, which has a window going outside which I had open. I had paused the TV and was on my phone, texting and on Facebook, when I hear something. It's the screen of my window slowly being slid up. I know the sound. I had snuck in and out of this place numerous times growing up, so I slowly get up and watch the window. I clearly see the screen moving very slowly up through the curtains. So I walk up to the window, and as soon as I move the curtain, at least 3 or 4 people scatter. I run out front, but they're booking it down the street. I knew it was that Johnny kid and his friends. I didn't see them, but I knew it was those dickheads. I didn't call the cops or anything, cause I wasn't exactly living on the right side of the law. So I just go back in and lock everything up, and the rest of the week goes smoothly. I never told my parents about it, and I also never seen Johnny again. Called him a few times, which he never answered. I even offered to front him, which was a load of rubbish. I just wanted to see him. But he didn't reply. Which was all the reason to know that it was him, and he knew that I knew. So like a month goes by, and I'm watching the news, and Johnny is on it for murder, which blows my mind. Him and 3 of his friends went out of town, broke into some old couple's home, beat them, tied them up, and stabbed them. Then they burnt the house down after robbing it. They all ended up telling on each other, and he got sentenced to 35 years for testifying against his co-defendants. Makes me wonder, if I was asleep when they got in, what could have happened? Also, on a side note, after he got caught, his mother just abandoned the house where they were living in, and the bank came and took it. Nobody really knows what happened to her or where she went. I imagine the shame kind of forced her to move. So, weird kid, you used to live next door to me. After you're done serving 35 years, let's not meet again.